Welcome to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank. This is a podcast by pastors for pastors. And we are here with the whole crew. As I said, my name is Frank. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson. Down in South Carolina, we got Delmar P. And together in the Morning After Ministry Studios in Florida, we got Andrew Larson and Timothy Miller. The guys are all here. We just want to make sure before we dive into two great questions from the Facebook group, we want to remind you that we have the Practically Pastoring Conference. The Practically Pastoring Conference is back February 17th to the 19th down at Lakeview Church in Tarpon Springs, Florida. It's just a suburb of Tampa. It's going to be a great time. Hey, I wanted, since we announced this, a couple of things have happened, and I want to make sure that our listeners know about this. So the first thing you should know is this. This is the most affordable conference in 2025. It's only $39 until September 30th. It's super affordable. We want your whole crew to be here, but we also have some special things we want to add to this. So can one of you guys talk about the spouses, about how we have a special event for ministry pastor spouses, and share something about Tim, if you could share a little bit also about what Lakeview is offering to families if the people brought their whole family to the conference.
Yeah, we're doing something extra special this year. First, for the spouses, if you're going to bring your spouse, there's no charge. You pay for your ticket, you get your spouse's ticket for free. We want to treat your spouse. So my wife Stephanie is coming up with some ideas for some ways to just spend some time together, maybe something extra special, extra fun. It's going to be a really cool something. I can say that just from hearing what I've already heard. And we also, as a staff, last week at staff meeting, the conference got brought up, and the staff kind of want to pitch in and help. So if you want to bring your family, maybe there's some little ones that need childcare. We are working on getting childcare, at least for the main session. So if you want to come for any of our session time, you could potentially bring the kids, and we'll have free childcare as well. Also, you probably know if you went last time, and chatting with Sam Rudkin today about what it could look like if he were to open up his house yet again. So lots of fun things in the works, some new, some old, but really looking forward to just hanging out. But
no spouses at Sam's house, because
it might be a no.
Listen, there's a movie theater room.
That's
you can
true.
lock the girls in there. We can put on the Notebook or something.
Wow.
And the boys can have fun. It'll be great.
I don't support the chauvinism.
The Notebook. I know. I like the underhanded complementarianism that's happening here.
Yeah,
that was not underhanded.
I hope there's at least one husband spouse of a female pastor at this thing.
I hope so
awesome.
too. As the one person who is at a full-on egalitarian church, I really hope so.
Hey, we're halvesies, though.
The irony of this.
We're halvesies.
I'm just a jerk. I'm not.
No. Okay. Well, this isn't selling the conference, but what will sell the conference is that it's really affordable. It's going to be really practical. Like we said this last time. To me, the best part of any conference is what happens in between the sessions when people are just like networking and hanging out and sharing ideas. And this entire conference is like focusing on that part for the whole 3 days that we're together. So one thing we really want to make this as like low pressure, like as low obstacles as possible. So besides making this very affordable, we'll shout out our sponsors in the coming weeks because they're helping us make this very, very, very affordable. Our sponsors has also made a way for some pastors. So let's say you want to come to this conference, you can get the plane ticket here, or you're going to travel here, but you're going to be pretty tight on the accommodations, and maybe you can't afford an Airbnb or hotel. Someone has purchased or rented, whatever the word is, an Airbnb that's right by the church, and they have a bunch of beds in that place, and they specifically got it so that way they can house pastors for free. So if you're interested and you can get to this event and you want to save money, you want to save your church's money on housing, there's an opportunity for that. You just reach out to me. We can make sure that there's a bed available. And it's kind of like camp, but with air conditioning. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be a pastor's house with a bunch of beds where people are going to be able to, even if, like, let's say you don't want to get a rental car, you might be able to.
You're making it sound real weird, dude.
I thought I was stoked about this.
No, it's great. I'm excited. So if
So
you're
anyways,
interested, slide into Frank's DMs and ask him about a
don't
bed.
do that. Don't slide into my DMs. You can email me or email the.
We're going to
there's a
find out
contact
what
area on the
happens
website.
when pastors stop being polite and
start
start
being
getting real.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good 20-year-old reference, Andrew.
The real world practically pastoring.
Nice.
And then we can play games. We can make like the challenge. That's how I got all my good camp games back in the day.
Your church members show up and you have to convince him not to go to the other guy's church.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
These are fun.
But also, for some reason, they're covered in grease.
We have better kids ministry. What are you going to do now?
This is the real life experience of Andrew and Tim every week of just convincing each other to not let members go to the other tourist church. Or never mind. We'll talk about that. I'm so glad that we're having this conference. $39. As Andrew said last week, he can't even get a dinner for himself for under $39. So
my Applebee's lunch today was $15.
That's so.
That was for like a lunch special. So man, come to the Practically Pastoring Conference and maybe buy me lunch.
There's going to be meals included in this. There's going to be swag, all that kind of stuff. PracticallyPastoringConference.com. All right. Hey, also, we have a Facebook group, which a lot of these questions today are coming from. And also, we have an Instagram account. We also are on YouTube. We have lots of clips, a lot of fun stuff. So we want you to follow us on all those different places. And if you can, it would be an honor if you can rate and review this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to this. Give us a review. That'd be great. All right. Here's the first question. When someone comes to you asking if you will perform their wedding ceremony, what's your first steps to take, and what's the process for them? What's that process look like from the first question to I do? So what does everything entail from beginning to end? When you get that email, I would like you to officiate the wedding, all the way to the ceremony. What's your process?
Well, first thing
I
you
think
do
it
is you
depends on
check
if
your
it's
date.
a church member or not. Yes, check the date first.
Check the date.
But I have a different process if it's a church member versus some rando. In Florida, you get a discount on your marriage license if you've had premarital counseling in the state of Florida. And I am one of the registered people in our county to do that, just kind of as an outreach vehicle for the church, that there's people in Safety Harbor looking to get married and they call me.
Yeah, thanks for telling me you had to be registered. I
Did you not realize that?
I didn't know that. And then a couple was like, yeah, they didn't give me the discount. You have to be registered. And I was like, oh, well, Andrew Larson didn't tell me that. So
Well, it would have saved them $30. They could have paid for the Practically Pastoring Conference.
that's true.
Honestly.
With the money they would have saved on their premarital counseling license. Really, it's like hey, if you complete I think now it's down to 4 hours of premarital counseling in the state of Florida. It's they're really lowering the bar. But so if it's a random person coming to me or someone that is not a member of our church, I am not going to have the same expectations as someone who's a church member, because I had a pastor years and years ago tell me, Andrew, you're never going to lead anyone to Jesus if you tell them that they are not good enough for you to marry. And that's one of those things that's just kind of stuck with me. So I might have a lower bar than some of you will. John, I'm going to say I do have a lower bar than some of you will to get married, because again, in the state of Florida, a notary public can marry you. You can literally get married at the post office in Florida. So if someone is inviting me into their wedding and I get to infuse it with the gospel as much as I can, then more times than not, I'm going to say yes to that. But if it's a church member, then we're going to set up premarital counseling and all of that stuff as well.
I had a guy who was at a previous church I was at, and he reached out to me and said, will you do my wedding? It's in October. And I know him. I've known him for like 10 years or so, and he's been dating this girl for 5. So we're going to be having that conversation. First thing I did was check the calendar, because I have another wedding the day right around it. So I checked the calendar, and then similar to Andrew, I do premarital counseling, specifically if they're in my vicinity, if they're in my congregation. If they are under another pastor's authority, I will actually have them reach out to the church. So the guy who I'm officiating in October, I told him, I said, okay, I don't mind. I know you. We have a relationship, but I need you to reach out to your shepherd to let him know. Because I think that is, first of all, it's courteous. I'm coming into his church to perform a wedding. And second of all, because pastorally, he needs to have authority over him in that space, and he probably will do counseling with them. If it's in my jurisdiction, if it's in my flock, we do premarital counseling. It's between 4 or 5 sessions. And I have all of those planned out. Each one has like a theme and certain questions and action steps that they do. I know some of y'all use the book that Doug Field wrote. Is that right? So You're Getting Married. I've heard good things about that. I do think the biggest thing when it comes to it is you need to have a plan. The worst thing you can do is be like, I'm going to sit down 30 minutes beforehand and just kind of get my thoughts together and spew it all on them. I would definitely advise against that. And some of your plans should involve the big stuff that you probably can get off of ChatGPT if you ask, like finances, children, as far as how you're going to discipline your children, where you're going to go to church, how you're going to handle conflict. Crazy question. Who gets to win? What does winning look like in conflict? How does your sex life work? So all these things don't avoid, because whatever place you don't sweep the cobwebs out of the corner, that just more is going to collect. And also, as much as it entails being involved on the day of, I will give feedback. Many of you guys perform lots of weddings. Sometimes when you're the pastor and you show up to a specifically like a smaller wedding and there's no wedding planner, guess what? Sometimes you are the de facto, the guy who's in charge of the service. A lot of pastors show up, they don't know that. They just think they got their script, they're going to say the thing. But a lot of times they don't really tell you, but they expect you to literally officiate the entire thing. Stand here, do this, do that. Just at least be prepared if that is the case. And whenever you are going through it, I would also prepare them on the front hand of like, something's going to go wrong. Something always goes wrong. You're always going to have like the mother-in-law who throws something off. A couple things that I do are non-negotiable. I will say I probably hold my line a little bit further back than Andrew as far as who I'll officiate for. I don't know a better term. I was forced, I guess is probably a good way to put it, to officiate a wedding between a Christian and non-Christian. And I really have strong convictions against that. Similar, if they're both non-Christians, that's fine. I will tell you, if you handle it, if you have to handle a wedding between a Christian and non-Christian, I will at least make them aware of where you stand on it. Because when I have that, what I do, I set in place, I have what are like first, second century wedding vows. And this is something I have hard locked into my officiating of weddings, because it helps me share the gospel. Because I am with Andrew. Every couple that comes through needs to hear the gospel. So I use very old vows that have stood the test of time, and we go through those together. And as we walk through them together, we explain them, and then I actually have them go on a date and say their vows to each other on the date. Because I say, listen, these are the biggest commitment you're going to ever say. When you're in front of all your friends and family, you're nervous as heck. You need to go and say this in a space where you mean it. And actually, they did work in our favor, because I went through the vows. I had one who was a Christian, one wasn't. And then when I got done explaining, we took like a whole session to go through the vows, because you can unpack a whole session with those commitments. And I asked her, I said, how much of these vows do you believe? And she says 100%. I'm all in, because it supremacy of Christ, everything. And then I looked at him. I said, how much of these vows do you believe? He's like, I'm about 70% there. And I said, well, then we need to end this session, because the conversation you need to have is when y'all are in front of your loved ones, are you, lady, okay with him only meaning 70% of what he says? Because he's going to say these vows. And that actually, it wasn't harsh, but it was some necessary friction, because one of the things we do in the counseling is we provide some friction. That's what we do, because they need to learn how to work this out. So I do. If they're not, we definitely have those gospel conversations. Then as you get closer to the wedding, I would go ahead and shoot them a text like a week out. So that way it's not like the day of the wedding and they're getting married on the beach and you don't even remember because you think it's a different weekend.
Listen,
and then you have to wake up.
I thought it was that weekend. I just thought it was the next day.
Yeah,
that was so smooth, Del. So
oh my
smooth.
gosh, yeah, I just worked it in there. But yeah, so I love Andrew when you posted a picture of you on the beach with them. It was like so grateful to do weddings with my couple.
I know.
I was literally in the middle of a hurricane, just drenched.
I know. I was like,
Because
they have
that
no
is a
idea.
kid.
This guy was in his underwears watching cartoons with his kids an hour earlier.
Hey, I made it, and it was beautiful.
But anyways,
And they are
I'm
still
almost
married to this
done. I'll
day.
shut up. But yeah,
3 weeks later.
at least text him like a week out to make sure you got your schedule good. And then I would also do a follow up because I know the question says, "What do you do until you say I do?" But I would also put a reminder in your phone when you do that wedding, even if it's 3 months, 6 months out. So do a follow up. It could be a card, it could be a call. But I mean, that's an important day, and you don't want to feel like just a hired gun, though you might be. You want to do a little follow up. So that's some of the process on my end.
For me, I am certified in Save Your Marriage Before It Starts, which is like a premarital survey. So it's worked out well because I've gotten to know a couple of couples in my community, one of whom ended up actually breaking up before the wedding because of the counseling, which is actually good.
There might be no better feeling in ministry than causing a couple to break up during premarital counseling.
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever had a bigger win than they didn't, ruin their future.
Agreed.
Yes.
It's really weird because they're upset and stuff,
Especially,
but
I
also
felt-
it's like, this is great.
I especially felt
I'm
that way.
so happy for you.
For the woman, because the guy was kind of like, good, I'm out. And she was, he was just basically saying yes for her. So they weren't ready for that. But so the process is somebody sends me an email or asks me if it's a church member, they're maybe coming up to me after service and saying, hey, I'd like to talk. So we start chatting. And first thing I do is send them the Symbis or Save Your Marriage Before It Starts survey. They each, and I stress, you take it separately. Don't look at each other's answers. They each get their own link. When they're finished, if it's a church member, the church pays the $30 fee for the survey. So that survey has all those kind of questions in it. It's like faith-based, but it's not a Christian marriage thing. So with members, I will also either, if I have a lot of lead time, if the wedding's 6 months out, I will give them Timothy Keller's book on marriage and we'll mix that in. If we have a shorter amount of time, I will give them excerpts from the book and we'll talk about those. But I typically have, I try to have no less than 3 sessions with a couple before the wedding day and, as many as 6 or 7. So we'll go through different sections of the Save Your Marriage Before It Starts survey. I actually have one this week on Thursday. We're going to talk about conflict. And so we talk about all those different things. One of the pages in the survey that gets talked about the most is that page that covers it's got 30 or 40 different specific tasks or things that who's going to do this, him or her. And it's decide, plan family vacations, who's going to make the money, who's going to fix the car, who's going to take the garbage out. And that actually leads to the most conversations because it unveils all the assumptions they kind of came into marriage with. So we do that. They take the survey. I just take the survey apart and break it into 4 or 5 sessions. And then the last session or 2, depending on how far out we're talking, we specifically talk about the wedding ceremony and the things they want to have in it. And we actually plan the ceremony. So, and then the day of, it's just arrive and, you're going to do the rehearsal. And then day of, you're going to arrive and do the ceremony. So, if they're a church member, I'd try to follow up 6 months later, So that's fun. There's a young couple in my church who I married a little over a year ago, and they're about to have a baby. So we just found out it's a baby boy. So that's pretty exciting. And I know the dad listens. So congrats, buddy. But yeah, really exciting, fun to be part of people's lives like that.
My process is very similar to Jeff's. However, I do work through getting ready for marriage. It's a curriculum by Doug Fields and Jim Burns. Andrew and I have been using this curriculum together for a while. I don't require them to read the book. What I have them do is I have each of them purchase a workbook separately, and it is definitely wedding season. I'm currently in the midst of premarital counseling with 4 couples, with I think the 5th one's about to start. So we have a lot of couples that are getting ready to go through this process. Some of them are church members, some are not. I've said yes to a few family weddings, which is cool. One of them was my cousin, and I'm really excited to do the wedding. One is the daughter of a church member, granddaughter of a church member. So I'm I try to get everyone through the same premarital counseling if I can. It doesn't always work out because sometimes it's a last second thing, or it's a, hey, we've had this situation a few times where we've been living together. We no longer want to live together. We want to get married. And I love that. I'll tell people all the time, I will marry you tonight. And one time someone took me up on that. We literally did a wedding within a few days, a few hours. Got a couple at the church right now. They're just trying to pick one night, like this week or next week, to just do it. And so I'm excited to do those as well. When I have more time, like Jeff said, I like to do at minimum 3. Usually we do 6 sessions. So if it's 6 months out, I do 1 a month. If it's a little closer, I might do 2. And what I love about the workbooks is I tell them to do them separately. So do not look at each other's answers. So they work as far ahead as they can in the workbook. And that kind of gauges how far we get in the session. I cap each session right at about an hour so it doesn't go too long. Sometimes they can get heated depending on the answers to said questions in the workbook, and I don't want emotions to get too high in the sessions. So we sit down together, we pray together, I talk about expectations in the opening session, and then we just start going through the book. I'll have someone start reading their answers while the other person usually laughs because they either got the same thing or they said something way off the wall. And typically it'll generate a lot of good discussion. And then I'll start to cherry pick a little bit once I know the couple and kind of get a feel for where they're at in their relationship. So I told a young couple, she was in my youth group. I've known her for a very long time. I told them, look, you guys have obviously been dating for 6-7 years now. Some of the stuff's going to feel really silly because you've already talked to each other about this, but I still want you to do that. However, we're going to skip this section. You're going to go home this week and you have homework. You are going to go through these things together. If there are any notes, just jot them down. And when we meet again in a couple of weeks, we'll go over those together. And then similarly to Jeff, the final 2 sessions are service planning. So what details do you need from me? Do you want traditional vows? Are you doing your own vows? I recommend traditional vows. Those who want their own vows, I've said, can we do both? And some couples have been open to doing traditional vows with their own vows sprinkled in, just because I've heard people try to wing it, like their own vows on the spot. And
I'm gonna love you forever.
It's weird.
I promise to always let you watch football on Saturdays.
Yeah.
If people want to write their vows, I make them recite them to me on the last session at least, if not 2 before.
I'm doing that from now on.
I've had some really bad.
I'm like,
let me write my own
let's
vows.
be honest, it's always the dudes.
Yeah.
It's always
100%.
the dudes. I'm like, bro, come on, write something down. Like, come on.
Yes. And then I'm upfront with people. Every couple that I've married recently has said, hey, how much do you charge? And I'm like, guys, I don't have a set, maybe you have a set fee. I don't have a set fee. If it's a destination wedding, I just ask, can you help me cover my costs to get there? If that. So I've done a couple of those as well.
One thing that I wish we had in place, that if I'm ever going to a new place, before I start at that church, I would have a wedding fees thing built into some kind of a contact us page. Like if I worked at Lakeview, a church where it's very pretty and people that don't go to church there want to get married there, and I know you guys usually say no to other weddings, but if it's a place that there's going to be a lot of weddings, man, I think having your fees laid out in advance, because
be helpful.
There's something about the crisp $100 bill that people think is just recession proof, but aside from the pizza order in Home Alone, that's the same cost that it is now, 30 years later, the honorariums for weddings and funerals are about the same as what they were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And as nice as that crisp $100 bill looks, it does not spend nearly as much as it used to. And so I think being honest about an honorarium, hey, if I'm giving up, especially if I'm doing a rehearsal dinner, and a wedding, and people are like, oh, well, you get to come to the reception. I work on Sunday morning. You think I want to be out with you and your family till 11 o'clock on Saturday night? That's not a gift to me. That's an obligation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Spicy Andrews here this afternoon.
I think having the wedding fees built into some kind of a, hey, this is what our church charges, whether that's me or the associate or whomever it may be, that's something that's good to have in writing, because I don't think, the couple has no problem dropping $3,000 on a DJ, but they don't want to spend $300 on the pastor. That's a little bit silly to me.
I will say the other thing I just did this with a couple that I'm marrying at the end of September. I just told them my manuscript for ceremonies is typically not that long, and I hope that's okay. And her response was, thank God. the last wedding I went to was way too long, and I was going to ask you politely, please do not have a long ceremony. It's like, well, then that worked out great.
Yeah, ours mine is about 14 minutes.
Yep, same.
And if you want to add stuff to it, we can absolutely. If you want to add communion or whatever else you want to add to the ceremony, absolutely. But no one is coming here to hear me preach. There's about 14 minutes. There's about a 5-minute challenge from me, and everything else is you guys, and we can add anything else you want to add into it.
I asked the couples to remain abstinent, and it's an awkward conversation if you don't know them, but it's the very first session. I do say from here on out, I'm asking you to remain celibate, I guess would be the better term.
And in regards to your manuscript, I would encourage you write everything in it, write down and highlight it in red. Tell everyone to sit. I've been at weddings. Yes. I've filmed weddings where the pastor forgets to tell everyone to sit. Here's what I've done, fellas. I actually made a shareable Dropbox link, and I posted it in our show notes here that we can see. And any wedding resources you have, we could put in here. And Frank, if you want to put that in a link in our notes, I actually put down a session outline for 4 sessions in there. And I put an example of a wedding service in there. And I put an entire wedding planning outline so you would know all the elements. A lot of pastors don't realize sometimes there's upwards to 22 parts of a wedding.
That is gold, Dale. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. So if you want to take that link, if any of you fellas want to add any of your resources to it, anyone who wants, it's an open Dropbox, so you can feel free to download and take whatever you like.
I will be brief because a lot of people have said a lot of things. At my church, we do have a document that has all the prices, every variable from you want to get married at our church but not use a pastor to you want to use our pastor offsite. All those different fees, all those different things, how much we charge is all in a specific document that people can see ahead of time. Typically, there's one of 2 situations at our church. Either a couple has gone through premarital counseling at our church. We have classes twice a year that are about 8 weeks or 7 weeks that go through multiple couples to go through this premarital counseling class. And then if a couple from there wants to get married by a pastor, then I only have to really do 1 or 2 meetings with the couple to kind of plan the actual wedding. I would say that's about 70% of my weddings are that. And so I'll get an email saying, hey, we're going to get married in 3 months. We went through the class. I contacted the leader of the class. They affirm that they're good to get married. And then I do exactly what we've kind of talked about. Ask them to remain celibate till they get married. If they're living together, for us to figure out what kind of arrangements we can do to make sure that the temptation isn't there. Sometimes there's unique situations with kids and things like that. I've found that I do the proposal of, hey, I will marry you this weekend if you want to forego this long process, even if it's not like people living with each other. I always propose this because I'm saying you would save so much money if you didn't do the whole hoopla of the wedding and just have a party. And there was one couple who did that, who didn't have the ceremony. They essentially eloped with some close family, and then they just had a big party afterwards. And they saved $5,000. And I'm like, you guys are geniuses. You guys now have a deposit for a house or whatever. You're saying pay off debt with that money. You don't need to be a princess. You can just have a party and it'd be great. No one takes me up on that. And I understand that. And people want their day and I support it. So if a couple did a premarital counseling already through the class, then I meet with them. We go through the ceremony. As Delmar said, I assume, unless told otherwise, that I am the person running the entire ceremony. So we go through every detail. I ask if there's a runner. I ask for the colors. I ask who the ushers are. I talk to them about the ring bearer and remind them to not actually put the real rings in the ring bearer's pillow, but to give that to the best man because the boy is going to lose the rings. I asked them for the order of their wedding party, and then I write it out in reverse order and in normal order. I do all those different things, and I actually do that in the first time I meet with them, even if I'm about to do premarital counseling with them. The reason why is I want to kind of get as many details as I can ahead of time, go through counseling if I have to, and then one more time right before, a week or 2 before, go through everything again, and at that point I'll have my manuscript ready. With my message and just like we've said, the whole ceremony from beginning to end, typically between about 20 minutes. If they want to add stuff, we can add stuff. My message is pretty short. And I just try to tell them, hey, a wedding is just a party that people attend. And the most important thing are the vows you make before each other, before God. So whatever tradition you decide to have, that's great. If you want to not do any of those traditions, you might get mom and dad mad, but that doesn't matter, right? Like all that matters is the vows that you make. So if you want to rearrange an order, if you want to walk out together instead of the bride doing the mark, it doesn't matter. What matters is the vows that we make towards God. Just like Andrew and Tim, I do Getting Ready for Marriage by Doug, and it's been a great book. I go chapter by chapter, like Tim says. I cherry pick some of the questions. I lean in on the hard conversations. It's always the hard conversations about communication, about money, and about sex. Those three topics are always going to be the ones that are going to be the most like crazy. And what I find is I start every session by saying, how's your week been going? Is there anything immediately you want to talk about? And oftentimes there might be something like, yeah, we had a big fight this week and this is what happened. And so sometimes we'll talk about that, even though the session's about like, do you want kids one day? And that's fine. What's good is like, don't avoid the conflicts that are happening in that session, because you're teaching them how to fight fair when they get married, type of thing. So anyways, Doug's book is great. That book will be in the show notes. Symbis is classic. I think I personally used Symbis when I got married, but like there's a bunch of different tools. The biggest thing is there's like a personality test that everyone needs to take separately to kind of know how they're kind of wired, and like questions of like what their expectations are, and then them confronting where they're separate, and then kind of walking through them. Every kind of good premarital thing will have something like that. And it's just like, not as the pastor, not avoiding difficult conversations. I just did a wedding. I just did a premarital counseling session a couple 2 months ago, where I literally told a couple, I'm nervous about how quickly your wedding's approaching and the issues that you're facing right now. I would suggest that you postpone your wedding till December. And I said that, and I've never said that before. And it's kind of like Andrew convincing people to break up before they get married. It's one of those things where it's like you want to set them up for success instead of just feeling the pressure of the timeline of the wedding coming closer. Because so many people feel tension in the engagement process, but they say, we've already paid so much money, let's just get married, and think they can solve the problems later. And the problems you have during engagement are not going to go away after you get married. So lean into the tension. And I always say it's like the solution isn't having perfect communication skills or perfect conflict resolution. The desired thing is the person repentant? Is the person willing to say, I'm sorry for what I've done, I'm sorry for what I've said? Is I'm willing to try, I'm willing to make effort here? Like that is great. That's important. If a person's stubborn and they want to fight you tooth and nail, then we have some bigger issues going on here. Anyways, I like what Delmar said. We'll have a link, a Dropbox link where we'll share all this stuff. But hey, we've talked a lot about this first question. Let's talk about this one other question that I'm going to try to summarize because it's a big question. The small group leader lovingly tried to care for the participant in a situation that was happening in the church that the person felt was frustrated with some experience they had in the church. Something that small group leader said made this person feel uncomfortable, and in her own words, feel like she was unsafe. So that person wrote a letter for the small group about what happened and how the leader made her feel uncomfortable. The pastor intervened and jumped in and said, hey, I don't think it's appropriate for you to read this letter to the whole small group. I think you should just follow Matthew 18 and talk to the leader directly. The woman received that, but didn't like that. And her husband are now claiming that they're having church hurt because they feel like it's an unsafe environment where they can't share how they actually feel. They feel like this vulnerability is not real, and that they're taking a multi-week break to heal from the pain and the tension that has happened in the church. And so the pastor just wants any advice on how to mediate the situation moving forward. It seems like the pastor agrees with what the small group leader has done, but there's this big conflict with this couple that wants to like kind of air all the tension to the small group, and the pastor and the small group leader wanted to kind of keep this within just the two people involved. Guys, we've all been here. What do you guys say?
I have not been here. I have not been in this kind of exact situation. I've been in, situations of personal conflict. All right, so I'll tell you what my take on it is. It sounds to me like, and I hate to be the cynical one. No, I don't. That's my role. it sounds to me like the couple that's offended is trying to gain support, and that's probably their motivation for wanting to share it with everybody. It's possible they have some other motivation, but typically in a situation like this, the reason they're mad is because they feel like they can't get their side heard, and they want to gain allies in the group, and they kind of want to see, well, if you knew the truth about the leader, then you would be upset too, and it's that whole thing. So I think that it sounds like it's being handled the right way, and it's just hard, and just people are immature, and it sounds like, I hate to say it, they're on their way out of your church. When people take a multi-week break, they're usually gone.
Sounds like they want a reason to leave, possibly.
Yeah. They're looking for a reason to leave, and they've kind of already left. But maybe not. Maybe they'll come back. I've seen that too. But just reading the question, that's kind of what it sounds like to me. So what you should do is pray a lot. What you should not do is try to, if you're the small group leader, is try to defend yourself and defend your side of things and build a case. You should, continue to work with the pastor. And if you're the pastor, I mean, I think if you trusted this person enough to be a small group leader, you need to trust them enough to deal with this and not try to step in and like step on toes. So it is kind of to steal Andrew's classic line, it is a discipleship issue. And you need to make sure that small group leader feels supported by you, but not necessarily that you're on like their side, just that you're there with them and that it's a difficult situation.
Yeah, and when you're having those conversations, especially if you go to the Matthew 18, you got to state that up front. Hey, I am for everyone here, because if not, it can seem like a team up. And another thing is, I do see your campus pastor, depending on how much influence this couple has, just practically, you probably want to let whoever is ahead of you, you don't have to give them all the details, but just let them know you're working out some discipleship issues in one of your small groups, because it can go that way. I definitely, if they're willing to, here's my take. If they're willing to lean into a Matthew 18, I would just go ahead and go there before you go to the next step in your head. Because if you're together in conflict, we know that's one of those places where the Holy Spirit really works. And if these people are genuinely believers and they're trying to come together in community, chances are, hopefully you can come to some kind of agreement in there. Now, if not, well, then that's where we know what the second step is. First, you go one-on-one, then you take someone, then you take it before the church. If this is a sin issue, which would be, all right, we're having this conversation about where do we go from here? And if they bring up transition to another church or whatever, it's a conversation you got to have, because as shepherds, we protect the unity of the flock, So sometimes that means stepping into conflict with them. But yeah, I would definitely set that meeting up, have it. Don't go in there cold. Like, I would go in there with some guidance that you're going to take that meeting as well, even like some perimeters. I had to do this with a couple. They were together, then they split up. They weren't married, but it was general toxicity after a relationship ends. And they were the passive aggressive stuff at church where you're saying stuff, but you're not saying stuff. Everybody is getting brought into it. Finally, I said, okay, we're meeting up. And just given the nature of them, I didn't want it to explode. So I said, we're meeting at Waffle House. So we met in Waffle House because, granted, you could still explode in the Waffle House. But, with the hash browns and the square cheese, it's hard.
I knew Andrew was going to want to say something.
Bert's chili. It's caused me to explode more.
I knew it.
I set you up. We got in there, and I had her tell him everything that offended of the offense. And then he had to restate it back to her, not respond. But when she was done, he had to say, so this is how I feel, that when he said this is how it made you feel. This is how I came across. And then I had him tell how this entire interaction was for him, and I had her restate it. And as they were talking, I was writing down all the offenses. I was the one keeping the ledger. And then when we were done, I said, okay, I've got like 25 things here. Now, here's the deal. Waffle House is open 24/7. I've cleared out my calendar. I get infinite cups of coffee. We can go through each one of these. Or you could choose the path of grace, and you could look each other in the face and say you're going to forgive each other. And they did not want to sit in that Waffle House for 3 hours. So they said, well, we're going to forgive each other. So then the next pathway in my conversation was, okay, this conversation now has to become, what is the nature of forgiveness? because you might have to wake up and forgive him again tomorrow and then forgive him again the next day. That doesn't mean you didn't forgive him the first time. We're humans. So yes, set up the conflict conversation, go in there ready to dig into it. And if they want to go into the conflict, okay, you're a mediator, tough love. If they're wanting to choose grace, now we get to talk about forgiveness. And then on the end, I would always say, okay, so what's next? I don't say, okay, well, this was a good talk. What's next? Okay, what's next is we're moving on. This is behind us. Just like, Jesus doesn't count our sins against us. I'm not holding this going. Okay, so whatever we agree upon is what's next is what I, the pastor, am allowed to hold accountable from this meeting. So if we agree that you're forgiving each other, if I hear that you haven't, then that's where we're going to be having another conversation, because that's my biggest role is help mediate. And then as their shepherd on the other side of it, give me the things that I can use as accountability to shepherd them. So I think there's a lot of power in that meeting.
I'm with Jeff. I think these people are probably on their way out no matter what. Just the language being used. They are looking not just for offense, but they're looking for other people to be offended with them, which is why they want to air their grievances publicly. I think you need to be careful if you're the leader in this situation that you realize that there's a good chance these people aren't going to stick around no matter what you do. But if you give it, you're going to also set precedents in how you handle this. So if you give them the extra little bit of rope here now, if they stick around, they're going to look to get even a little bit more next time. And if they don't stick around, then everybody else is going to point back to the way that you handled this one. So it stinks. You hate to lose people. You hate for people to be upset, but you also need to do things the right way because it's going to last a whole lot longer if you don't. And I think that's kind of what you need to be trying to avoid. It's hey, offenses happen. Leadership screw-ups are going to happen, but the way that you respond to them needs to be consistent. And what I always say when there's church issues is individuals are allowed to make mistakes. The institution is not. So like an individual pastor can screw up, an individual small group leader can screw up, absolutely. But that's why we have a plurality of leadership. That's why there's more than one pastor at the church. If you're a campus pastor, that's why we have elders. So to make sure that there's a consistency with how things are handled from one situation to the next. So, if there's feelings involved and there's people that you've known and loved for a long time, I get that it's hard, but you need to be consistent. And the way that works is by handling this the right way, even if it's the more unpleasant way. And if these people are so desperate to be heard and so desperate to be offended, I mean, it takes a lot of work to be that offended. They're going to find what they're looking for if they're looking that hard.
I would say this, some, but not all of these things can be avoided if talked about appropriately ahead of time. One way that we try. Why are you muting me? I said 4 words and like Tim's done. You just went for like 3. You had a whole monologue.
I was about to take a long sip of my drink. I didn't.
He's like, I'm going to mute Tim while I drink my drink. As I was saying,
I was trying to avoid that sound. I'm
got
an
the
idiot.
nice
Rudely
mics,
interrupted.
but can't handle them, huh?
I know, bro. What's up with that? So we do talk about conflict resolution in membership class. We talk about the Matthew 18 process. The way that we handle church discipline is also discussed in membership class. And something we just started doing recently is we kind of pushed a home group manual to all of our home group leaders, and we asked them to read the manual in the home group at the next home group meeting. So it felt a little formal, but I actually really enjoyed it because it talked about kind of the do's and don'ts of home group and here's what's expected of you. And if there are any issues, here's how we're going to go about handling those issues. I say that as kind of like you could help yourself out and your church out if you take some proactive steps. Now, to this case here from this question, honestly, I would ask the couple, can we bring another elder in on this and just have a sit down? Like, can I take you out? Can I buy you a breakfast or a lunch? Can we talk through some of these things with another elder and let's talk about best steps moving forward? I hear you, Andrew and Jeff, they might be on the way out, but I'm still probably not willing just to let them walk out without at least them knowing that, hey, we're going to be here. Right.
Yeah.
We want
to fight for them, but you should have accurate expectations as well.
Absolutely. But we want to do all that we can to pursue reconciliation. I think that's got to be first and foremost for us. And if they're not willing then to sit down with another elder or another leader to just have a conversation, then that's going to be tough to move forward. So
Yeah.
definitely not an easy situation.
My point was that the fact that they want to not resolve it with the person and they want to air the grievance is bad faith. They don't
Agreed.
actually want to resolve the issue based on this. And one
Yeah.
other thing I would say is a pastor that I know, and I've seen him do this. One thing he says is we don't give resources to dysfunction. So, like, what we're not going to do is start two groups now, so that these two women don't have, or these two people. We're not going to do that. And there's a limit to how much time we're going to spend on let's bring another elder in and let's talk again, and if there's not repentance and if there's not reconciliation, we're not going to continually pour resources into dysfunction. And so I remember one time I was walking out of across the courtyard at the church I was at, and my pastor friend was having not quite a confrontation, but he was rebuking an older man who had kind of made an ultimatum. And I remember hearing him say, "Hey, this is God's family. We don't make ultimatums. So this is going to be the last time that we're going to have a conversation where either of us makes an ultimatum with one another. Let's resolve this, but we're not going to make ultimatums. So if you want to leave the church, you can do that, but you're not going to threaten it and hang it over my head. That's just not how we treat each other in a family." And that guy repented and stayed, and it was great. But sometimes you need to speak a hard word like that. And the last thing is I see those two words that can strike fear into the heart of a lot of pastors, and that's church hurt. And you just can't let that be a bludgeon over your head. Like people have heard that phrase now, and they will start using it as a weapon against you. Well, I think that this might be church hurt. Well, you know what? I don't know about that, but what I know is we're going to do things the right way, and we love you and we want you to stay. But at the same time, like, you're not just going to throw that word around to get your way. That's not how a family works. And so as a pastor, as an elder, one of the roles you're taking on is you are one of the kind of the dads in the family, and you do have to set the kind of the atmosphere for, hey, conflict is going to happen, but this is how we're going to handle it.
That's good. I don't think anything else needs to be added. We're probably going to post this video under the comment on the Facebook group. And so, like with anybody, if you have a question and you wanted to get asked on the podcast for more people to see it, we'll post this video in the Facebook group, and hopefully people can engage in the conversation some more. So good luck to whoever you are. It's going to be a messy and complicated road, but
Godspeed, buddy.
But it's going to be worth it. So, hey, for the book of the pod, the book of the week that I want to recommend, it's called Jesus and the Powers by N.T. Wright and Michael Bird. Last week, I talked about the spirit of our politics, but this one is a little different. This one actually takes like a nuanced perspective of how like different political systems can or cannot be like understood with a Christian worldview. And what I love about it is N.T. Wright is a British Anglican man who doesn't live in America. So he could speak very cognitively about what's happening in our country, but he's speaking it from already a post-Christian nation, and it's pretty interesting. It's really well done. I like to say he has bullets for everybody. Whether you are super conservative or super liberal, he's going to show you why the kingdom of God can't squarely fit in any of those political parties, and what God is calling us to live is kind of outside of that realm, but still be consciously and intentionally engaging in our communities, in our politics as well. So that's my recommendation. And in the weeks to come, Jeff, Delmar, Tim, and Andrew are going to have book recommendations that we would love to share with you guys. But if you're interested in picking up that book, it's in the show notes in this podcast. So with that being said, thanks so much for joining us. Again, if you can, go to practicallypastoringconference.com, $39 until the end of September. We hope to see you there. With all that, my name is Frank.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Dell.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is the Practically Pastoring Podcast. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, buddy.